Hey there, good afternoon. Hope everybody is awesome. Kathleen, it seems like your volume was up really loud when I said that. Sorry about that.
It definitely was, but I fixed it.
You can see it in your face. It's like, that was a lot of Rick all at once, bam. All righty, so as I mentioned, when I released a lot of those statistics last week, I had a lot of requests for how did you pull those? And so I wanted to give you the down and the dirty and the kind of the short, simple version, because pulling those stats that I gave to you guys really takes like less than 5 minutes on the MLS. And so I wanted to show you at least how I do it so that you can have that in your arsenal. And then kind of pivot the conversation to more of a conversation about utilizing those statistics. Most of you heard the story of Fiona and Redfin. I'll tell it quickly, just in case you didn't hear that story. A couple of weeks ago, Fiona came to me and said, "So I thought I had this listing like in the bag in New Canaan, and now the owner is coming back to me saying that they also met with a Redfin agent." Yes, we do actually have Redfin agents in the state of Connecticut. We don't have a lot of them, but we do have some Redfin agents in the state of Connecticut. And the seller had been sold on the fact that Redfin does more advertising and marketing than any other company in the state. And so we started to go through some conversations around how do you win against that statement, right? And so the answer, in my opinion, is not showing them how much marketing and advertising that you'll do. Instead, the conversation is, let's go back to the numbers and let's have them prove what they're saying based on the numbers, and or invalidate what they're saying based on the numbers, right? And so that's what we did, and we did it 3 different times, because this was a very stubborn seller who just continually came back and said, okay, but this, but they're telling me this, they're showing me this. And each time we had to go back and prove that different based on the numbers. So I want to show you how to pull the numbers and then pivot to that conversation on our second half of our call today. Would that be a good plan to spend our time? All right. On the 7 people whose heads I have nodding up and down, the rest of you with no cameras, you're at the mercy of the 7 people I can see, because what they say is what we're doing. No camera, no vote. That's my rule. See, I knew we could guilt some of you into turning your cameras on by saying that. I love that. Oh man, look at that. We're going crazy. Okay, so as I said, I utilize the MLS. I know we have broker metrics. I know there are some other systems out there that aggregate and create reports and things of that nature. I personally like to push the buttons on the MLS myself, tell the system what parameters I want, write down the numbers and do the math. And the reason I like to do that myself is because it prepared, just like you need to utilize those numbers when you go and, oops, sorry about that. Hold on one second. Just like you need to utilize those numbers when you're sitting in front of a buyer or a seller, when I'm pulling those numbers, I need to be able to speak confidently about them to you as I'm giving them to you. And for me personally, I know how my brain works. If I'm the one pulling them, I am now more at ease with what those numbers say. I know that they're accurate because I went through the motions of pulling them. I took out my calculator and did the actual math. And so by going through that process, I'm ingraining the data into my brain, which then when I go to speak about it, just makes me sound like I know more what I'm talking about than maybe I do, because I didn't just ask a report to be done and I'm reading a report to somebody. So people always ask me, why don't you use X, Y, or Z? Because all this can be done for you. I get it. I personally, from a preparation perspective, like to pull all the numbers myself based on what I'm going to show you now, and do the math myself so that I have a better familiarity with what I'm actually speaking about. I think if you've done it both ways, you would agree that actually going through and doing the math yourself puts you more at ease with your answers than if you're just taking it from somebody else. Like, I give you numbers. If you use my numbers in a conversation, you are less familiar with what those numbers actually represent than if you sat for 5 or 10 minutes and did the math yourself. You'd be better prepared, right? You'd feel better about it, and you'd present better. Does that make sense to everybody? Or at least the people I can see? Which now numbers 15. Holy Christmas. Let's see if we can get everybody's camera on by the end of the call. See, Lori's even eating her salad and she doesn't care. She's like, I don't even care that I'm eating because this camera is on. I love it. You're all good. You eat away. We want you to be healthy and strong. Feed that mind. Now Chelsea's eating. Oh, good. Everyone's going to be eating now. Alex is drinking. All right. Everyone says, I'll turn my camera on if you get on with it. So I will get on with it. So I'm going to share my screen with you and dive into the MLS. I think. Yeah. Okay, Alice, can you see the MLS screen? Okay, perfect. So many of you have heard me go through some of this before. It's no different. And so I'm going to run through quickly exactly what the numbers I pulled for you last week. And so that's going to be units year over year, price year over year, listings taken year over year, month supply of inventory, days on market, and list to sale ratio. So those are the ones I'm going to run quickly through with you. If you want something else, just jot it down. And as soon as I get through these 6, I will ask if there's anything else you want me to show you how to pull based on things you've heard in the past or have seen from me or elsewhere. And I will be happy to walk you through that. So as most of you know, I work out of cross-property search. There's a whole bunch of different searches. There's residential, there's single family and condo, multifamily, land. I like cross-property search because it gives me everything I need all on one page. I don't have to go to a different search page if I want different property types or whatnot. This cross-property search it is exactly that. It is a cross-section of all the different property types and allows me access to anything and everything. So the way I run numbers, so we're going to run numbers today on a specific town, right? And I've chosen to use, I'm going to use Westport as an example because a bunch of people asked me for numbers on Westport. So I figured, you know what? We'll use Westport as an example. That way I can actually write down the answers and get people the answers they were looking for. So we'll use Westport as an example. The first thing we're going to do is choose property type. So if you see here on the left-hand side, property type, we're going to say single family, condo, multifamily, land. Those are the 4 residential property types that I consider the market in general. I do not consider residential rentals part of the market stats. If you want to run rentals separately, that's fine. The problem with including rentals is that it skews just about everything, right? It skews everything in ways that creates problems for the for sale side of the market. So you do need to separate the two. Some of you may be looking at all those property types and saying, okay, well, you know, that's too broad for me. I really am only interested in single family sales. That's fine. You can always create your own criteria depending on what it is you're trying to accomplish. For me, when I look at a town in general, I like these 4 property types to give me a well-roundedness of the town. Okay? Some people argue that land shouldn't be in there because it skews the days on market number. I get that. I'm just telling you how I do it, right? So you can choose to do it as long as you're comparing apples to apples. You can choose whichever criteria you want. I choose these 4 property types. In the center here, you have Fairfield County and Westport chosen so that you're now limiting it only to a single town. Depending on the town that you were looking at, you would just choose from this list. we've chosen Westport today. So our first stat that we're going to pull is units sold year over year, right? Units sold year over year. And I'll tell you why. Because when you go to units sold year over year, you not only get the numbers you need for units sold year over year, but part of pulling that gives you an opportunity to also look at days on market as an average for the year and list to sale ratio for an entire year. So I'll show you that in just a moment. So in status, you're going to click closed. And in the box next to the closed status, you're going to now ask the system for all closed units from January 1st, 2019 to December 31st, 2019. Okay, so there's last year's closed units. Now you can see at the bottom, you don't even have to go much further than this. What does it say the units sold were in 2019, right at the bottom there?
400.
Right, 400 matches. 400 matches. So you can just simply, again, I take little scraps of paper. I'm not fancy. You can certainly put this in your computer. You can put it in an Excel spreadsheet. I just use little scraps of paper because that's just me. So 400 units in 2019. Now you simply go up and change that. Again, this is not high tech. I hope some of you aren't disappointed. Like, really, this is how he does it? It's not high tech and it's not complicated. It's actually pretty simple, right? So now you'll change those numbers to 2020 and look what happens when you change them to 2020, right? Not a big surprise. We have a huge jump up to 711 matches. Make sense? Now, before we continue the math on closed units, I want to show you what I do once I pull the 2020 numbers for the year or whatever time period it is sometimes you're doing month to month, like what was January like in 2021 versus January of 2020, which you might do on the 1st of February or the 2nd of February, right? So we're just using the year because we're in the second week of January and it's easy to do. So once I pull the 2020 numbers, I will then ask the system for a little bit more information because your days on market as an average for the year and your list to sale ratio as an average for the year comes from those statistics. So once you have the 2020 numbers pulled, you see it's 711 matches down here, right? So you do jot that down under your 2020 category column, and then you're going to ask for results, which is down here at the bottom next to the matches number. And when you ask for results, it will deliver to you all the results that sold in Westport in 2020. At the bottom here, you have a little tab called Stats. And if you click on the Stats button, you have an option of charts or tabular. You want tabular. So Stats and then tabular. And when you ask the system for tabular stats on anything that you've just run, you get here what I call the box. And I call it the box mostly because, well, it's a box. Again, I'm not terribly fancy. So this box now gives you these quick stats on the town of Westport. You can see here at the bottom, this is the criteria you asked for, in case you forget what you've asked. And here's what you get from the box. You get average, notice here you have average, days on market. So right here in the middle, your average days on market for the year 2020 was 103. Make sense? You have list to sale price ratio. This last column is list to sale price ratio. See how it calculates it for you at 98%? I know you think I'm a real pain, but I'm going to encourage you not to trust that. Some of you may be saying, boy, it seems like Rick has real trust issues. Now that may be true. And yet what's real is this calculation I have found is a rounding. And sometimes the better argument or the better scripts inside of some of these numbers are when you get to be exact. For example, if you're comparing something that is 97.6% versus 98.4%, that from a scripting perspective, I look at that and say, especially if my number is bigger, my team and I are outperforming the market by nearly a full percentage point, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. And yet, if I just take the MLS's word for it, both of those numbers are likely to be averaged or be rounded to 98%. And so now I have no script. I have no opportunity to use the numbers to my advantage. Do you see my point there? So I like to do the math, and how you do the math is, you see here in the middle, you have list and close price. Well, the way you get the list to sale ratio is you divide one by the other, right? So right down here, you'll take the average sale price, which is $1,502,644. Gotta love Westport. And you divide it by the average list price, $1,549,808. And when you do that, you get 96.956. So you get 97%. That's what the math tells us. Do you see what the MLS told you? MLS told you 98%. Now, I don't know about you, but in third grade, I didn't learn that rounding 96.9, that you rounded up to 98%. I never learned it that way. Maybe the new math, maybe I'm just dated in my understanding of how we do that. But so that's why I like to really do the numbers myself, because I find that sometimes there's just inaccuracies here. So the list to sale ratio for all of 2020 in Westport was 97%, even 97.0%, because the math says 96.95. So we're going to round that to 97.0%. Any questions so far on what I've done? Okay, here's the other fun part. Once you run this, and this is why I do closed units first, you can also from here, as we start to continue to move down that list, get another piece of information, and it's median sale price for 2020, because you're going to need, for pricing, you're going to need the median from 2020 versus the median from 2019. The good news is you already have the median from 2020 right in front of you with this particular box of information. Do you see where it is?
Hey, Rick.
Let me finish this and I'll come back. So here's the median on the left-hand side, and you come over here to close price. So the median price in 2020 in Westport is $1,260, $1,260,000. So you fill that in your chart. And that's pretty much the path that I go down, because using this one first gets you all of the closed units, it gets you days on market, it gets you list to sale ratio, and it gets you the median for the current period. Then we'll go back to the criteria and change the criteria to get the median price from 2019 and the rest of the information we need. Does that make sense to everybody before I go to Silva's question? So again, there's a reason I do it in this order, because it just saves time. And when you're doing it for a lot of different towns or a lot of different time periods, or you're doing it all the time, you want to make it as efficient as possible. So I have found that this is the most efficient way through this exercise. Go ahead, Silva.
If you divide 422.04 by 432.50, then you are going to be rounding up to 98%. That's why they do it that way, I guess. And my question is, I can never make the sense of it to remember it, no matter how many times I listen to you. Which one is the preferred number, the median or the average, and why?
I'm going to get to that as soon as we move on to the median sale price. So give me half a second.
Thank you.
Yeah, and so if what Silva is saying is correct, if they're pulling list price to sale price off of the price per square foot, that is the dumbest thing I've ever seen, right? Because it's what is the relevance of that, right? There really isn't a whole lot of relevance there. So again, just underlines my point. Go and do the math yourself, because that may explain why the numbers are oftentimes wrong. So go and do the math yourself. Any other questions on what we've done so far? Okay, so now we're going to click the back button not necessarily up here, but there's an actual back button in the system right here at the bottom of the box. You're going to click this back button, and that will take you back to the results. And then either up here at the top, criteria, or down here at the bottom, criteria, either one of these two criteria buttons will bring you back to the search screen. And so now, moving through our list, we're going to change our ask and figure out median sale price for 2019. So again, we're still in the same, nothing else changes except the closed date. So you're going to go back and change 20 to 19. You're back to your 400 matches, right? Results. And then in order to get the box, you're going to do stats and then tabular, right? So stats is at the bottom and then tabular to bring your box. And when you get back here, what you'll notice is the median here on the left, close price for 2019 was what? Was $1,050,000. Yes? Now, if you were trying to figure out list to sale ratio 1 year to the next, you could certainly do that by calculating that here. If you wanted to see days on market year over year, you could certainly calculate that by jotting these numbers down. I like list to sale ratio and days on market, not necessarily as a year over year comparison. I pull them for the town to be able to see if either my own stats or the office's stats are better than that, so that I can utilize something like the script I gave you before, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. Does it make sense that my team and I are outperforming the market by about 1.5 percentage points? So my question for you is, does it make sense for you to list with me this evening, knowing that on average, we're putting, in your scenario, at $1 million, an extra $10,000 to $15,000 in your pocket? Do you see how you can use that to argue your commission? Well, somebody said they would do it for 0.5% less than you. I understand. Let me ask this: does it make better sense for you to list with me tonight, knowing that on average we receive offers and get closings for our clients that are up to 1.5% better than the general competition? I'm curious, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, would you concede the 0.5% in my commission to me, knowing that you're likely to put an extra 1.5% in your pocket by listing with me? If you net that out, you're still a percentage point ahead. Your call. You're still putting $10,000 more in your pocket, and I get to do the work that I need to do to make that happen, right? Or something like that. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the Redfin conversation. So going back to our criteria page, we now have only two other things that we need to work on, right? We need to work on listings taken and month supply of inventory. Now, again, we haven't done the math on this. I'm going to go back to the top and just do all the math all at once we pull the numbers to do the math. So for those of you who are anxious that we don't have plus or minuses percentage points, we're getting there. So now we're going to go to listings taken. If listings taken is an important metric for you to use year over year, that does not have to do with closed business, right? So we're going to unclick closed. We're going to leave everything else the same, unclick closed in status and leave status blank. And then what you'll do is you'll scroll to the bottom. Now, for many of you, you have listing contract date already here under the very bottom in additional fields. For some of you, if you scroll to the bottom in your MLS and it's not there, all you have to do, you see it says add remove next to additional fields. Well, you will click add remove and you'll get a screen. You see on the left, it says available fields. Well, there are about 400 zillion available fields in your MLS. Not all of them show up in every report, and some of them don't show up in any report. You actually have to go and ask for it. Listing contract date is one of them. So you can just kind of go and find listing contract date, which is right here. And then you would just click add in the center to move it over here into selected. Make sense? This is also how you build custom reports, by the way, right? If you only want certain things, you can literally start with a blank screen and build a custom report based on what you want to see, just as a by the way. So that's where you get listing contract date. And then you'll go back to your screen. And then it wouldn't surprise you to know that you run listing contracts 1/1/19 to 12/31/19. And you'll see you get, in the matches up here, you get 930. And so you jot that number down. And then you come back and you just simply change it to 2020. And you'll see the number up here in matches changes to 1,052. That's it. That's the extent of getting the two numbers you need for knowing whether listings taken is a positive or negative number year over year. Really simple, right? Okay, and so I'm going to stop there for a second and then just run through the math with you. And then we're going to dive into month supply of inventory, then pivot to the Redfin conversation, or then pivot to questions and then the Redfin conversation. So if you take a look, we have three things that we've written down now: closed units, median sale price, and listings taken. We have a 2019 number and a 2020 number, right? And so now you have to just figure out, is it plus or minus and what percentage? So here's how you do that. For those of you who are unsure how to calculate that, here's how I do it. Now, the mathematicians in the room may tell me I'm doing this incorrectly, or there's a faster or different way. I'm just telling you how I do it. I'm not saying it's the right way to do it. However, it does get you the right answer. So it is a right way to do it, even if it's not the right way to do it, right? So closed units, we had 400 and 711. Clearly, just by looking at that, you can see it's a plus, right? It's up year over year. By how much? You take the 711 and you subtract the 400. So you'll take the one and subtract the other. You'll get a difference of 311. You then divide that answer, when you subtract the two, you divide that answer by where you started, by 2019, right? So in this case, the 2019 number is 400. So 711 minus 400, which is the 2020 number minus the 2019 number, gives you 311. You then divide that by where you started, which is the 2019 number of 400, and you get 70, rounded, you get 78%. So that is up 78%. Now, quick math tells you that you're correct, because if 2020 was 800 and 2019 was 400, what percent increase is that? 100%, right? Because you've doubled the number. So knowing that we haven't quite doubled the number, but close, 78% makes sense, right? So just kind of do a common sense check on the numbers in your head to make sure that you're going in the right direction. Now, for those of you who are posting in the chat, I can't see the chat at present, so I will get back to the chat in a moment. But while I'm screen sharing for you, I struggle with seeing the chat. Jumping down to median sale price, we'll just do it 3 times so that you hear it over and over. You take 1,260,000 and you subtract 1,050,000, which are the two numbers that we got. So you're going to take 2020 and subtract 2019. You get 210,000, and you divide from where you started. So you divide by 2019, 1050. That is an increase of 20% even. So the median sale price in Westport has increased year over year by 20%. By the way, just another little math trick. If you take 2019's number of 1,050,000 and multiply it by 1.2, which would represent an increase of 20%, right? You get 1,260,000. So that's a way to check your math. You can always take the 2019 number, or the first number, the one you're comparing the current to, and multiply it by that percent by doing 1 point whatever. right? 400 times 1.78 gives you 711, or pretty darn close. And then lastly, the listings taken, you take 1,052, you subtract 930, you get 122, you divide by 930, which is where we started in 2019, and you get plus 13%. Please remember.
Say this last one again. I'm sorry, it was too fast. Sorry.
So also remember that when you get an answer that is 0.13, right? That's 13%. If you get an answer that is 0.013, that's 1.3%. So always remember that the first two digits after the decimal are your percentage point. Make sense? And so, so again, the last one, Silva, is 1,052, which is the 2020 number for listings taken, minus 930, which is the 2019 number, is whatever I said it was, is 122 divided by the 2019 number of 930 gives you plus 0.13, plus 13% year over year.
I just don't know where you got these numbers from.
So I'm just using the numbers that we pulled, that I wrote down.
Okay.
Right? And then that's just subtracting them.
Okay.
So again, you're going to pull the numbers, you're going to jot them all down, and then you're going to do the math on the numbers. The math is the last piece that you do after you pull all the numbers, because the MLS isn't going to do that math for you. And even if it does or did, I wouldn't trust it.
I'm with Silva. I don't know where you got these numbers, Rick.
Okay, so guys, they're just the numbers that I just showed you how to pull.
Yeah. Hey, Rick.
Yes.
Rick, this is Eric. Can I make a slight suggestion to make it easy? I hear a lot of people struggling with numbers. First subtracting and then calculating the percentage. But actually, if you would take the number of 2020 and divide that by the number of 2019, you would end up with something looking like 1 comma or 1 dot something, and then you subtract 1 and you have your percentage. Maybe that makes it easier.
So sure, again, as I said, there's not one way to do this, right? This is the way I do it. I purposely don't do it the way Eric just mentioned, because that confuses my brain, right? And so clearly I have the odd man out brain, right? But guys, the good news is that on your calculators, either way works. My concern is that a couple of people said, I don't know where you got the numbers, right? And so the numbers that we're working with are the numbers that I just walked through and said, okay, we're going to pull 2019 listings taken. And we got 930 listings. We're going to pull 2020 listings taken. We got 1,052. So I guess my question is there a question about where the numbers came from? Or is there a question about the math to turn that into a percent up or down? Where are we getting lost? Which one do we have to spend a little more time on?
It was where they came from, but now I'm clear, because I remember now that you showed us where to go and add the field, which I saw for the first time. So now I'm good.
Yes. And so if it was just the listings taken, if you were confused about where that is, you do have to add the field in. That's not typically on your screen. And again, either the way that I mentioned or the way that Eric mentioned about doing the actual math, both of them work. You just have to know where your math abilities lie and which one makes the best sense for your brain. Either one will give you the right number.
Yeah. Rick, can I ask another question? I missed the first couple of minutes of the session. My apologies. Are listings taken and everything we've been looking at here? This is not. Is this specific to KW or is it overall?
So we are working with Town of Westport right now, just as an example.
Okay, so it's not specifically our brokerage.
Exactly right. And if you're ever confused about something that you're working on, right? So in this scenario, it was just being a few minutes late to the call, so you weren't sure. But if you're ever uncertain about what you're working on the MLS, remember that at the bottom, when you hit the results, tab, at the bottom, it always tells you what your criteria is right here at the bottom, right? So if you're ever uncertain, like sometimes when I'm doing this fast, I'm thinking, oh man, okay, is this 2019 or is it 2020? I can't remember which one I just pulled. Instead of going all the way back to the criteria screen, I can just look down here. Of course, I took that out, so it's not showing up here, so I can't point to it for you. But just remember that the criteria is always at the bottom when you run the results.
Okay, thank you.
I have one question.
Yes, ma'am.
I want to recap the 6 criteria that you're looking at.
Yes, ma'am.
And I try to write them down. Unit sold year over year.
Yes.
Median sale price. List
Year over year.
Year over year.
Yep.
List to sale ratio.
Yes.
Days on the market.
Yes.
Listings taken.
Yes.
And what's the 6th one?
So the 6th one is the one we haven't done yet, and that's month supply of inventory.
Thank you.
Right, month supply of inventory. So if there's no other questions on where we've been so far, and remember, this is also being recorded. So if it's helpful, you can kind of go back and listen to me drone on and on all over again, just in case you want to either confuse yourself more, or if some of you have trouble sleeping, I do find that sessions like this, bam, they put you right out. Just get about 6 or 7 minutes in, and you're golden. No, my point though is that if you're struggling to kind of keep up with writing things down, if it's helpful to go back and listen again, you can watch on the screen as I explain, and you can kind of do it on maybe a separate computer or listen and take different notes. Okay, month supply of inventory. If there's one thing that I have learned over the last 20 years as an instructor, is that group math is always the downfall. Right? Group math is always a struggle. So if you're not hearing it or you're not understanding it, it's because you're not seeing it. And we're also not in a room together. So group math online makes it even harder. So don't feel like you're not getting it. And for anyone who really doesn't understand what I'm talking about, stay on at the end, and I'll be happy to kind of one by one go through exactly how the math works if you're struggling with it. Don't feel like it's a dumb question, because I'm certain that if you have that question, half the people on the call have that question. All right, let me bring you through month supply of inventory now, right? So month supply of inventory, we're going to keep the property type and Westport all the same at the top. Month supply of inventory, however, is a metric that is tighter in. We're not looking at month supply of inventory for an entire year, right? That would defeat the purpose. So month supply of inventory now looks at things that have closed more recently in comparison to what is currently active on the market. So here's how you do that. Again, we'll keep the property types the same up top here, as well as the town selection. And the first thing you're going to do here in the middle, it's status, is you're going to click the closed button. Generally speaking, what pops up is 0 minus 365 to give you a rolling 12 months. However, we don't want that. That's way too much. We want to change that to 90 days. So 0 minus 90 reaches back 3 months from the day that you're doing it and tells you how many properties have actually closed in that time period. Now, I'm going to just scroll down a minute to make sure that we don't have anything in the listing contract date. We do not, because that is sometimes a mistake I make when I do this after listings year over year. So the fact that we do not have anything listings contract is what we want. That's the right place to be. So 0 minus 90. So we're asking for closed units in the city of Westport, in the town of Westport, for the last 90 days. And you'll see here at the bottom that what you get is 178. Right? So that's 178 units sold in Westport in the last 90 days. What you want to do is calculate from that what we call the absorption rate, or the rate that homes are being absorbed per month in Westport. So since 178 represents 3 months, because we asked for 0 minus 90, we then need to take that number and divide it by 3 to get a per month number. So let's do that, and then I'll answer the question that may be on 50% of your minds. That question being, if you want a per month number, why don't you just do 0 minus 30? We'll answer that in a second, right? So 178 divided by 3 gives you 59.3. So the absorption rate, the current absorption rate in the town of Westport is 59.3 homes per month. Now, can anyone tell me why we don't just do 0 minus 30? If we're looking for a per month number, why do we go back 3 months and divide by 3?
You don't get an average over time.
Exactly right.
Yes.
You need at least, you need 90 days of data to kind of even out the bumps. If you only did 30 days of data, you wouldn't have enough to make sure that you had an accurate picture, right? I personally believe 180 days is now too much. Even though appraisers will go back 6 months to find comps, right? I think 180 days when you're talking about month supply of inventory, because this is about pace, right, of the market. This is about trending in the market. I think 90 days is a perfect amount of time to give you enough data to make a judgment on without being too much or extending back into a market that may be different than what you're currently dealing with.
So Rick,
yes, sir.
if I may. So if I want to make this, maybe I'm going to make it too difficult, but if I want to make the statistic for, like, let's say the 4 quarters of 2020, would I then do this the 0.90, but with on the bottom that date field filled in for each quarter and do it 4 times?
Yeah, so Eric, let me answer that in just a second. Let me get through the rest of this piece, and then I'll go back and answer that question. So month supply of inventory, 0 minus 90, 178 matches, 178 divided by 3 equals 59.3, right? So you've now calculated the absorption rate. That's not month supply of inventory, however, because there's one more step. You need the absorption rate to calculate month supply of inventory, but in order to use that number, we need to know how many actives are currently on the market, right? So we're going to click off of closed in status and click on active, and that will tell you at the bottom there, right, that there are 131 current actives on the market in Westport. And then you do the math on that, because you're going to take 131, which is the number of active units, divided by the absorption rate, divided by 59.3. That's how many are going under agreement per month or selling per month. And you get 2.2 months. 2.2 months. And what that says to you or says to your seller is, if nothing else changed and nothing else came on the market, the current trending in the market, the current pace of the town of Westport says that all activity, all current units on the market would not be on the market in 2.2 months, right? Which if you then take that one step further to try and determine whether that's a seller's market, a transitional market, or a buyer's market, what we know is that 0 to 4 months supply of inventory is going to be a seller's market. So 2.2 is a crazy fast seller's market. Right? And for those of you who don't know those parameters, 0 to 4, I kind of like 3.999, right up into that 4 mark is that seller's market. Anything in that 5 to 6 range is more of a transitional market. And anything over 6 is going to be a buyer's market. I also look at things sort of exponentially. So if you're at 4 months supply of inventory, yes, you're at a seller's market. But if you're at 3, that 1 month really changes the pace of the market and how things feel kind of exponentially. So the fact that you're at 2.2, right? Many of the towns that I gave you last week were down closer to 1. Some of them, I think the Richfield number was under 1, right? It was 0.9 of a month. it's kind of like the Richter scale, right? The numbers don't represent just numbers. They represent kind of multiples of numbers. So going from 4 down to 0.9 in a seller's market, that will feel enormously different.
Rick, I'm sorry. What did you divide the 131 by?
I divided it by the absorption rate that we calculated. So that was the 59.3.
Yeah. Okay. That's what I thought.
Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So again, month supply of inventory is going to be closed for the last 90 days, and then divide that answer by 3. So you get a per month closing number. That's what we call the absorption rate. Then you'll look and see the actives, and you'll divide the actives by the absorption rate to get your month's supply of inventory. Yes? No? Maybe so?
Rick, did you use just single family? I can't, could you scroll up? I missed what selection if you have the same, oh, so it's the same one. Okay.
Yeah, I didn't change anything on the top. So again, when I run these, I run it all apples to apples. I run every town the same so that we can, and when I run our own stats, right, to see if we're outpacing the market or not, which I'm going to do for you right now. What time is it? Oh, Christmas. Okay. So then, any questions on the 6 that we just went through?
Yes, I do have.
Yes.
So when we got the average, when we got the number 2.2 months, that means that the houses that are in the market right now active, by the end of the 2 months are gonna be in closing terms. That's what it means, or how can
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So what that 2.2 month supply of inventory means that at current trends in 2.2 months, everything that is currently on the market should be under agreement, which means there would be nothing left on the market. Now, of course, that also assumes that nothing else comes on the market, which never happens, right? So take all of this in stride, and yet it's a measure of the pace of the market so that we can help sellers see what kind of scenario they're in. Because if they're in a huge buyer's market, if we come up with 9 months supply of inventory, they have to be massively more aggressive with their pricing to attract someone versus 2.2 months supply of inventory. I'm going to get there in half a second, Eric. Versus 2.2 months supply of inventory, which means they can afford to perhaps push the number a little bit, right? So month supply of inventory really skews, or let me restate that, really informs a seller as to what market conditions are and how they can best take advantage one way or the other and what they can expect from the market. Eric, go ahead. I think I muted you, so you have to unmute again.
Sorry for asking so many questions, but I love mathematics. I want to reiterate on my question about per quarter if I want to do it myself. But before going there, I was just wondering, the 2.2 months you mentioned, which is great, is that in line with how fast the lenders can do their job? It's maybe not in the scope of this session, but because when we had our mortgage session with Westport Mortgages, I asked, like, what's the throughput time to get everything in order, and they said about 90 days, which goes beyond the 2.2 months.
So yes, that is true, and yet the two metrics aren't really connected, because 2.2 months basically says in the next 2 months those properties will be under agreement and not available for sale. It doesn't necessarily mean that they'll be closed, right? So the two metrics are slightly apart. And because of time constraints, I am going to answer your question. I'm just going to hold it to the end. So hang on with me at the end and I'll answer that question about quarters.
Thank you.
So then the only piece of this that I want to make sure that we cover before I get to the Redfin conversation is this. I want to make sure that you know how to pull your own numbers and or the market center's numbers, right? And I pretty much just showed you because you use the same steps. So in this scenario, if I'm going to use the market centers, right, I'm going to take out county and city, right? Because the office operates wherever. It's not really all that relevant to know. Now we can certainly make it Fairfield County if you want to keep it apples to apples, right? So you're using a town in Fairfield County's numbers versus our Fairfield County numbers. You then go back to closed. Again, I would keep all the property types the same. Then go back to closed and see what we ran for this past year. So 1/1/20 to 12/31/20. You'll then scroll down, and down here in list office, you'll put your market center's number, right? If you're in the Stanford Market Center, that's 3548. If you're in the Ridgefield Market Center, that's KELW 120. And if you include Norwalk in that, it's KELW 130 as well, right? So 3548 is the Stanford Market Center, KELW 120 is the Ridgefield Market Center, and KELW 130 includes Newtown in that, because there is a different code for Andy and his team and others out of Newtown. And so when you click that, you get 874 matches. You'll click results. And just like we did with others, you'll go to stats and tabular, and you'll get the box for us. Now, maybe some of you will just use one market center, right? Maybe you're going to only use your market center's numbers, right? I always look at things as an organization to be able to report to you how the entire organization is doing. You may choose to do it office by office, right? Now, if you're comparing one office to another office, it's imperative for you to use office to office. It's not fair for you to use 3 office codes versus somebody else's 1 office code. That's not apples to apples, right? So even though we look at both of our market centers and all the locations in our market centers as one unit, the MLS separates them out. So if you're, depending on what you're comparing, you may have to choose to utilize just your market center's numbers. However, quickly, if you look here in this same scenario, the average days on market for you guys was 73, compared to the Westport number we pulled of 103. That's a month faster, right? So again, from a scripting perspective, you get to go back to sellers and say, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, statistics show that my team and I sell homes 30 days faster than the average bear in Westport. I'm curious, can you see a benefit in listing your home with us due to the fact that we get homes sold 30 days faster than the average competitor? Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what happens when we sell homes faster? Generally speaking, do you believe that you get more money or less money when we sell homes faster? Of course, the answer is more money. The faster they go under agreement, the closer they are to list price. That's just a statistical fact that we can show you how to prove with a brokermetrics graph in a separate session, right? You'll take the listing and close price here and calculate your own list to sale ratio, right? So our list to sale ratio, 477,215 minus 484,329 is 98.5%, right? So 98.5% versus 97%, that's funny, because in the example I gave you before, I said that we were outpacing the market by 1.5%. And in this case, that's exactly what we were doing, outpacing the Westport market by 1.5%. Right? One of the things, I'll stop here for a second and just ask if there's any questions about pulling your own numbers, right? So days on market and list to sale ratio, those are important numbers for you to know, either for yourself, and if you were doing it for yourself, you just put your code in there, not the office's code, or for the market center, so that you can always be having these conversations about outpacing the market. Here's what's fun. If your numbers are not as good as you want them to be, you can work on your own numbers and run the market center's numbers. And if the market center's numbers are better, use them. Just change the script from I to my team and I. Make sense?
Can I ask a days on market question, please?
You can. I think that's Steve, but I can barely hear you.
Can you hear me now?
You're quite low. I will lean in. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. So days on market on the MLS, if I'm correct, that number comes from when it's changed to deposit. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I'm so glad you said that, because I was doing something the other day and found an agent over in Monroe whose average days on market, I'm going to stop the share for a second, guys, so we can, whose average days on market was like 24 days. And I had never seen numbers that low before. Almost always when you pull statistics for either an office or for an agent, the numbers are in the 60s to the 90s, sometimes just over 100, depending on the market, right? That's pretty typical. Clearly, what this guy is doing is he is not moving things into the show category. He's going bam, right into deposit, which is smart. And so one of the things you're going to hear me talk about probably tomorrow, if we get to have a Zillow conversation or not, I'm waiting on some additional information about some changes at Zillow that I want to report to you. If we don't get them in time for tomorrow's call, one of the things you'll hear from me tomorrow is exactly this conversation around, what if we just skip over the show status? If we want to improve our days on market to be able to use that as a tool, as a listing tool, skip over show and go right to deposit. There's nothing that says you can't do that, right? So it's kind of interesting in use of MLS. And so Steve is exactly right. The days on market stops when it goes to deposit. And so many of us to show first and then kind of let 2 or 3 weeks go by, sometimes a month go by, before we actually take the step of changing it to deposit. That is actually working against your days on market. And this guy over in Monroe proved that to me. I thought, wowza, there's a lesson. So thank you for bringing that up, Steve, because that is true. Did you have a question over and above that comment?
I did. I think you may have answered it, but I want to qualify that point, because in talking about days on market, that's not really a great apples to apples for the reasons you just said. People, it takes, am I correct too that I know it used to be, pending used to be when all contingencies were met, but deposit, I believe, is just when the contract is signed.
Yes, that is true.
So obviously that's going to change transaction to transaction. So just personally what I do is I do the MLS days on market, but then in addition to my own MLS days on market, I pull my days that I change it to show. And so I give the sellers that number as well. So my real question to you was, is there a way to pull off the MLS days till show on other than your own properties?
Not to my knowledge. Not to my knowledge. What you'd have to do is you'd literally have to go, you could like pull a bunch of comps and go into the property history and calculate it off of a certain number of listings, but you'd literally have to go into each listing separately and calculate it.
Which is how I do it for myself. So yeah.
Exactly. So really good points. Really good points. And again, remember, you're utilizing these to be marketing conversations and to be scripts to help people say yes faster. Any other questions before we pivot to this? Because I am going to spend just a few minutes. I know we're out of time, but I promised you the Redfin. So I am going to spend just a few minutes on the Redfin. As a matter of fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pivot to that real quickly first and then come back to questions. So the Redfin conversation was this. Fiona was pushed with, we do all the marketing and nobody else does marketing like us. And the seller fell right into that statement. And so so Fiona came to me and she said, okay, well, like what's a good, how do we fight that? Because he's really fallen for it. I've done all the scripts that I know. And so what else can we do? And so she and I brainstormed through, okay, well, let's see if we can prove it, right? Because I'm like a prove it guy. I like the data to back up what it is we're saying. So we went to the numbers. And the first thing we did was we pulled total units sold for Fiona in Fairfield County in 2020. Then we went and we pulled total units sold in Fairfield County for all of Redfin as an organization in 2020. Now, I'm going to make up some of these numbers because I don't remember what they actually were. But the reality was Fiona herself sold nearly as many properties by herself as the entire Redfin organization did in 2020 in Fairfield County. So then I said to her, okay, well, let's take it one step further. Let's then go and do a comparison of the market center, like their company versus our one office. So then it was in the entire Redfin organization in Fairfield County versus Fiona's market center, the Stanford Market Center. Right, and so it was something like 37 houses for Redfin versus 1,800 houses for the Stanford Market Center. Right, and so we got to go back and she got to go back and simply say things like, you know, my concern here, Mr. Seller, is that yes, I understand they keep talking about that they do more marketing than anyone else. My concern is that if that is true, I'm not arguing that that is true or not. Assuming that that is true, does it make sense to you that the advertising and marketing that they do is massively ineffective? Because they don't sell any houses, comparatively speaking. I'm curious, does it make better sense for you to list with an organization regardless of marketing and advertising conversations? Does it make better sense to list with an organization that has the proven results of what you're looking for, which is a sold sign? So do you see how we used numbers to combat we do more marketing? Because guys, in 21 and a half years, here's what I can tell you. No one ever won the argument of we do more marketing, because how do you prove it? It's he said, she said. There is no proof to that. It's a statement that gets made. Instead, pivot to where you can prove it and to where you're so massively strong as an organization. We simply sell more houses more of the time. We actually did a calculation to help her have this conversation to figure out that like Redfin sold a house in Fairfield County once every, oh, I forget what the numbers were. It was like once every 10 days. And Keller Williams sold a house in Fairfield County 4 times a day or 8 times a day or something ridiculous like that. So when you do the numbers and convert it into scripts to help people put things in perspective, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, who do you trust more? Someone who tells you that they have tons of marketing, or an organization and an agent that can prove to you success over and over and over and over and over again? Do you agree that saying you market and advertise more than anybody else on the planet and selling 35 homes in an entire year do not go hand in hand, do not make any sense? Those two things don't jive, right? And so after he was over that hump, he came back to her and said, Redfin is willing to do 3% if they represent both sides of the transaction. And Fiona was willing to give a break if she did both sides of the transaction, but she was not willing to concede to 3%. It's like working one side for free. And so again, we went back to the math and we calculated list to sale ratio for Fiona herself, list to sale ratio for the office, and then list to sale ratio for Redfin as an organization. And the example I gave you earlier was kind of where it fell. The list to sale ratio, we were like 1.8% higher list to sale ratio with a bazillion more units than they were with their smaller number of units. And so we got to go back and have the conversation that said, okay, so here's the good news. We can both win on this. List with me at this number with what I've put it in front of you. Even if you listed with Redfin and they sold it themselves at 3%, do you see that because our list to sale ratio is better, paying us more versus paying them less actually puts more money in your pocket. I'm curious, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, are you more interested in hiring the cheapest real estate agent or putting the most money in your pocket? That's the question, guys, because it's not about being the cheapest. It's about results. And you have the numbers to prove your results. And so when you use those numbers, they're almost irrefutable. Trust me, this guy tried to refute them over and over and over again. Fiona went back and forth for 2 solid weeks. And guess what? She won. She won because she was able at every turn to say, I understand that's what they're saying. Here's what the numbers say. I'm curious what your thoughts are about what the numbers tell us. Here's what's real, right? Facts matter. Facts matter. I don't care what's going on in the rest of the world where facts sometimes don't seem to matter. In what we do every single day, facts and numbers and details, it all matters. And it matters to the sellers. And it matters to you being able to show the sellers how much they matter. And when you have the data on your side like you do, I am not sitting here like a proud parent when I say to you, there are agents across this state, certainly in Fairfield County, and maximally in the 4 or 5 towns that we really have a massive presence in, who would kill for your statistics. Would kill for your statistics. There's a reason they don't use statistics. It's because they don't have them. You do. And so if you're not using those statistics to maximize your effectiveness and efficiency at the listing table or with buyers, man, you are just missing the boat. Missing the boat. Because most people would kill for them. You've worked massively hard to be able to have those numbers. Use them. Be proud of them. All right. Any other questions? I know it's 2:07. I do have a few more minutes. So if you're over time, I'm sorry that we went over a little bit. Feel free to beg off. We're going to keep the recording going. If anybody has any other questions, however, I'm happy to answer questions. So Raquel asks, can you explain why we use median instead of, hold on, I have to go back to it, median instead of average? Great question. I prefer, when we're talking about pricing, I use average for everything, except for pricing. When I do pricing, I prefer median over median because it takes out the outliers, right? The median is a units measure. Average is a volume measure. And so if you have a town, I'll give you an example. Say you're doing numbers in Bethel, right? And one year I was doing some numbers in the town of Bethel, and Bethel had one property that was like a multi-million-dollar property, and it sold for like $8 million. The average sale price in Bethel is far less than that. It's probably more in the high 2s or around 3, right? So that one sale that year skewed the numbers so dramatically, and it gave people the wrong impression about how much pricing was actually up. It was up, but it wasn't up as much as it appeared. So when you use the median is just the middle, right? Median is just another word for middle. So the median takes out the high and the low, any of those outliers, and just gives you what's the price of the one right in the middle. So if 400 units sold, the median is number 200, right? Regardless of what it is, there's 100, there's 200 above and 200 below. So that's why I use median, Raquel, because it takes out the outliers. Sometimes it's like a city like Danbury, sometimes you have trailer home, the trailer park homes over by the airport that get into the mix. And so sometimes they sell for $26,000 or $31,000, and that really skews the numbers down. So that's just another example of the other side of that. So in a median scenario, you get rid of all the roller coaster ride. Jonathan asks, can we have a list of the must-have metrics for listing presentation? I would say the ones I gave you are them. A month's supply of inventory is absolutely a must. I would say that the pricing year over year, certainly closed units year over year, listings taken maybe less so. And then your days on market and your list to sale ratio are must-haves as they compare to the town or your competitors or whomever else you're comparing it to.
Rick?
Yes.
When you go over, if you're doing that tomorrow about that show and deposit, could you explain if we don't need the show, why is it there? Or is there a case when you need it? I just got confused. If you say you can just go to deposit, why aren't we doing that? Or if there is a reason for the show and, you know, when we have to use one or the other.
Yeah, I will address that tomorrow because it's probably a longer conversation than we have time for today. And I want to just be able to reference what the MLS rules actually specifically say. As you know, I'm oftentimes at odds with the MLS, or the MLS is at odds with me. And so I want to go on record. If I'm going to go on record, I want to be able to say to you, here's what the MLS says, here's what I think, and we can figure out something in between or whatever. But I will absolutely do that tomorrow.
Great, thank you. Yes,
Raquel asks, when you do monthly pricing, would it be year over year or month over last year or same month? So it kind of depends. I like a look back in like a rolling 12 months. So if it's March, I like to go minus 365 and minus 365 to see what the run up has been. In a listing scenario, I might also look at like the last 3 months or the last 6 months and do last 6 months over the previous year, last 6 months, just to see, to try and tighten it up a little bit. Right. So I think it depends on where you're headed. There's lots of different ways to look at that. If I were heading to a listing appointment tomorrow, to really answer your question, Raquel, I think I'm answering it. I personally would come prepared with year over year numbers because we're in January to be able to say, look, so year over year pricing is up this much. However, if you go from last July 1st versus the previous, like the 6 month, the second half of the year from 2019, we're actually up this much because the momentum of the marketplace was so enormous. And the reason I might do that today is because A, that number is going to be bigger. And I'd want to have a conversation with the seller around expectations for momentum. We're fully expecting the momentum to continue January, February, March. So that's why this is relevant. Or we're expecting the momentum to start to slow down. We're expecting seasonality to finally show up. And so therefore, even though this number was here, we probably aren't going to see it. So therefore, we have to temper our decisions based on what the momentum is looking like. Does that answer that a little? Did I answer that, Raquel? I'm not sure I really answered your question.
Yes, for like a listing presentation numbers, but like for like a social media, like marketing perspective, like getting your numbers out there for people to know kind of what the previous month was. That kind of doesn't answer. Got
it. Okay, yeah. So from a marketing perspective, you can certainly, what we do for the market centers is we also look month over month. So we'll keep a rolling 12 months. We certainly look year over year, but we also look, when we transmit our December numbers, we didn't just look at the year-end stats. We looked at what was December versus December of last year so that we could go back and have a conversation. Some of the things we're going to be rolling out to you are based on some of those conversations, month over previous month, right? So for example, at the end of January, you can look back and say, all right, well, my business was up by 10% based on this metric, and the marketplace was up by 4%, right, in January. So now you have a metric that says, so for the past 30 days, based on this metric, my business has outperformed the current locale that I've outperformed the other Wilton agents, other Ridgefield agents, other New Canaan agents, whoever you're looking at, by about 6%. Does that answer it better? Am I getting closer?
Yeah. I mean, I get it. You could do month over month. You could do, the year over the year. So I get it. It depends on what you're trying to, who you're, who you're talking to.
Yeah, who you're already. You know what? That's probably the best way to say it. depending on who your audience is, you can use a lot of these different things. The other thing I will tell you is I keep running numbers until I find good ones, right? So if month over month was sucky, I'll go year over year. If closed units doesn't give me what I want, I'll go pricing. If pricing is still kind of crappy, I'll go list to sale ratio. I'm going to continue to search for a positive story that I can use in a Facebook ad or I can use in other marketing. It also allows you to kind of jumble it up and have people deliver different information month after month. And yet the reality is, as business owners, we don't always have awesome shout it from the rooftop news to deliver every single month. So what I do is I just keep looking for where the story lies. Is it a year-to-date story? Is it a month-over-month story? Is it a last couple of weeks story? Is it a listing story? Is it a pricing story? Is it a unit story, right? Lots of different ways, or is it a pricing story? So lots of different ways to look at that. Now I understand your question, and you kind of answered it better than I did. So thank you for that.
I have a question sort of similar to that.
Yes, Jonathan.
See if you could see my screen really quick. I see realtors on Instagram, they post market statistics in this exact style, and it's usually branded to their broker. Yeah. So this one is, I think, like Berkshire or something. Would this be on metrics, this kind of thing, so I could post it regularly, whether it be every month or so?
Yeah. So great question. So in the past, we have given you the data so that you can then take that and brand it to you to be able to post. And what the feedback that we've gotten from you is, we'd almost rather that you just kind of brand it generically so that we can just post it so we don't have to do the work. And so what we are working on right now for you are versions of that still honor your brand is more important than the company brand promise, and yet still gives you an opportunity to not have to spend the time creating the collateral, the copy and the graphics. So the answer right this very minute is almost. The answer in the next week or two is going to be yes. We're rolling out social media postable graphics to that effect with the stories that Raquel and I were just talking about.
Cool. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions that I can answer? Yes, Eric. Okay, so we're going back to the quarterly. Tell me exactly what that was one more time. So ask the question one more time.
Okay. So you gave a great explanation about this absorption rate and then the duration of how long a unit stays on the market. Over the past 3 months. So the month-to-month inventory of, let's say, 2020 to show those stats. So would I do 0 to 90 days in the closed field and then put the exact dates of each quarter in the field at the bottom of that search page and do that 4 times, once per quarter of 2020?
Got it. So unfortunately, month supply of inventory is unable to be pulled in hindsight like that, because what the information you don't get to have in that scenario, you can always pull the number of closeds, but you can't go back, and the system won't allow you to go back in time and tell you how many actives were available on that specific date that you're trying to figure out. So unfortunately, the way you can do that is you can start doing that today, and then every single month just kind of write down, okay, on the 1st of January it was this, on the 1st of February it was this. So you can start keeping your own numbers so that eventually you'll have that look back. But unfortunately, our MLS system doesn't allow for that activeness, because the listing is only one status at any given time. And in the rear view mirror, it's only going to be sold or withdrawn or something. Right. You see what I mean?
There's no version control unless you go into each listing and look at the history, and that would be too cumbersome. No, this is great. This is, as you say, measuring is knowing. Yeah. We have to keep track ourselves. That's indeed. That's a good advice. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, I'll open up one last question. Anybody else? Going once?
Where'd you get the sweater?
So I don't know where it came from. It was a present from, I think, either my mother or my grandmother for Christmas this year. I can't recall. I can ask. I'll ask them and see if they know. But it was a present, so I'm not sure. If I know them, it probably came from Kohl's. That's likely the answer.
That's what I was thinking.
Yes.
Rick.
Yes.
So, you said that tomorrow you're going to touch on Zillow and what's going on with Zillow, like, or.
So I may, if I have enough information. I have a regional meeting tomorrow after our 9 o'clock call, and so I may not have the info I need to be able to deliver that on Wednesday. So it may be the first part of Thursday morning. But if I get the information I'm looking for, because there's a whole bunch of things going on with Zillow, and I know you guys are concerned about it. So if I have the info, it'll be tomorrow morning. I'm thinking it's more than likely going to be Thursday morning until I have enough information to be able to come to you. So I'm working on it. I just don't know how quickly I'll have all the info I need.
Okay.
Okay. All right, guys. Thanks for the extra time. I appreciate it. I hope this was helpful. Stats are your answer almost every single time. So stay in the numbers, and that's not just for math people. I know I'm a math guy, and I can see that I have some fellow math people on the call. But if you're not one of those, right, just embrace the fact that statistically you can have conversations that are far more powerful when you can actually prove it and bring up some numbers to help people see what you're talking about, than it is when you're just kind of speaking extemporaneously. So there is power in those numbers. And again, there's massive power in your numbers. So be grateful for them and use them to your advantage. We'll keep working on scripting through some numbers as we continue through the month of January. I know I'll see some of you tonight at 4 o'clock in Ignite. I'm going to go and prepare for that. So I'll see you soon. Everybody else, I'll see you tomorrow morning at 9. Take care. See you soon.
Thank you.